I'm just going to give you just a little introduction to CORE. There are women who illuminate the world by kindling the flames in those around them, like all of you. CORE kindles theirs. CORE is an international organization that creates warm and inspiring Jewish communities by nourishing and networking from women who serve as pillars in those communities. CORE offers training, resources, and support for women in three primary ways. One of those ways is through CORE's communities of practice, which are networks of women who share an area of service to the Jewish community. These international communities provide support, inspiration, and opportunities for professional development. To learn more about CORE and the other ways we strengthen women, or to donate, please visit coretorah.org. That's CORE, and it's a capital T, so coretorah.org. And now you are in for a fabulous evening with these amazing women, and we're ready to begin. Okay, so the title of this night is, can somebody help me with that? I don't have it in front of me. Strengthening our students' focus and engagement, I believe. Okay, so we're going to start by explaining the operational definitions of student engagement. And as I call on the women who are going to talk, they're going to tell you who they are. Okay, so Liora, can you start, please?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank Alyssa for making this happen and Giti for agreeing to moderate this discussion, and to the other panelists. It's been very interesting to get to know all of you. So my name is Liora Wittlin. I live in Denver, Colorado. I've been here for about 8 years, and I've been around the country. And for about 15 years running, I was in the classroom teaching middle school and high school Tanakh classes, doing some administration. My role shifted a lot. I have also worked with younger kids. I have also, for the past 12 years or so, off and on taught community shiurim for women in my community, a variety of subjects, but Tanakh is really where my main passion lies. And right now I function as the Tanakh curriculum coordinator at Denver Academy of Torah, and I also have embarked on a new position as a certified instructional coach, one-on-one remote instructional coaching for Better Lesson. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay. So now can you explain to us the operational definitions of student engagement? What does that mean?
Sure. So this was something that occurred to me right away when I was given the honor of joining this panel, and I saw what the title of the conversation was going to be. And my first thought was, what do we mean by student engagement? And I think the icker is, it doesn't have to look like one thing. It doesn't have to mean walking into a classroom and seeing some particular image or setup, or hearing a particular volume, or seeing a particular person speaking or acting in a certain way. I think that the key to student engagement is learners are involved, learners are interested, and learners are part of the process. So as opposed to just being, kind of passive recipients of our teaching, right? That we are, bestowing something upon them. Not that that's, entirely untrue or shouldn't be the case some of the time, but student engagement means that the students are active participants in their own learning. So you could walk into a classroom and see students who are sitting in groups, who are completely lively, who are engaged in conversation. The noise level might be a little high. You might have some kids who are sitting on the floor, some who are standing up, some who are, moving around, doing different things, working with different materials. And that might be a highly engaged classroom. You could also walk into a classroom and see everybody sitting in their rows of seats, and it's silent, and the teacher is in one spot in the room. And that might also be a highly engaged classroom. So I think what we're trying to figure out is, what is it that is going to help us to, pardon me?
Yeah.
Do I need to speak louder? Okay, so I think we just need to try to figure out in my classroom, in my situation, what do I visualize? What do I conceptualize student engagement looking like? And it might vary on a day-to-day basis. But the goal should be students who are actively involved in learning.
Great, I love that. Okay, thank you, Liora. The next question is, what is your overall mission for student engagement? And Deborah, can you help us out with that? Unmute yourself.
1 second. Okay, thank you. Debra Green. I'm a native of Baltimore, but I've been living in Far Rockaway for almost 30 years. And I have been teaching in the Five Towns area for almost 30 years. High school, mainly seniors. I taught in Hefter High School for 14 years. It's a co-ed school, but I only taught girls. And then I was running Machon Basirachel Seminary. I was the mechaneches and also a teacher there. And for the past 5 years, I've been in SKA High School, which is a very large modern Orthodox high school in the area, teaching Tanakh and also GLA for the senior class. And my overall mission as Limudei Kodesh has always been that the girls should love what they're learning. I have always said that I never wanted to hit them over their head with the chumash stick. I really want them to love what they're learning, find relevance in what they're learning that they can add to their lives and add to their avodas Hashem, and to become lifelong learners. So I've always had this mashal that I've given over to the seminaries because I am the 12th grade, so I pass them on to seminaries. Baruch Hashem, I watch so much success in my community, my girls coming back and building their lives. And I say that our job is to make them into kalim. So kalim are receptacles. They're ready to receive. So whatever life, whenever they go out to life, they're ready to take in all of the shiurim, all the growth and all the, to utilize all the potential that they have. So that's what I see as my overall mission in the classroom. And in terms of just my day-to-day interaction and like what's going on in the classroom, I want them to go from just being distracted by all the noise that's in the outside world. And I've seen that just increase and increase and increase through the years. And there's so much at their fingertips all the time where they're always thinking like, what's the next thing I'm going to do? And the next thing I'm going to do and the next thing to look at. And there's no mysteries anymore because everything's just displayed on screens there, so and to get them to care in the moment about what we're learning. So to go from being distracted to caring with what, with what they're doing at the moment. What's unique about my situation that maybe other people don't have is that my students are allowed to have iPads in the classroom. I don't always let them, but that is one way that we can learn is through iPad learning. So there is what I can do and have them focus, but that's always something that I'm struggling with in terms of just student engagement, how much to use it and how much just to be that old-fashioned teacher just sitting up there, like Liora said, just teaching and having everyone be quiet and take notes. But we also want our learners to go from just being there to measure their success, like I want to do well on the test and I want to get onward to X, Y, and Z, to human learning, taking it in and really, I try to give them messages like the next time you daven Shmona Esrei, this is something that you can think about, and taking it and making it relevant and bringing it down to the human level. I try very hard to look at the temperature of my classroom when the girls walk in. Is there something that they need to discuss? Is there something that's bothering them? So that we can get away, we can kind of like move aside any distractions that they're having at that moment. And so then we can then go take the learning that, that we have, that's the Chumash is going to speak to them, the Navi is going to speak to them, Perkei Avos is going to speak to them, and move away the distractions so that they can be fully engaged. So that's my mission. I hope that I'm being successful. Just an interaction I had in the grocery store this week showed me I was being mildly successful. As I was talking to a student of mine from many moons ago, who I actually teach her daughter now, and she approached me in the grocery store to ask me a seminary question about her daughter's application, whatever. At the same time, a girl who was probably, I don't know, 8 years younger than her comes over and says, "Oh, Mrs. Green, I just had a baby, and I haven't seen you in such a long time. You don't even know I had a baby 3 weeks ago." And I was hugging, kissing both of them from like different time periods of life, which was just so nice. So I hope that I have turned them into the Kalim that's ready to move on in life and be successful. And that's my mission.
Thank you. Thank you, Debra. Before I call on Shira, I just wanted to mention that if anybody has any questions, we will have time at the end for questions. So please put them in the chat and I will monitor the chat. Okay. Okay. So Shira, what can you add to your explanation of your overall mission in your classroom?
Sure. Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Shira Hochheimer. I live in Baltimore. I'm the general program chair of the general studies in WITS, which is a local Orthodox college for women, for young women who come back from seminary, formerly Ma'alot. I teach a Kodesh class, and I'm also the director of technology there. And I've taught from 3rd grade through 12th grade for many years before I moved into administration and now in a seminary college level. So why are we defining the mission when we're talking about classroom engagement? And this came out of a whole conversation about classroom management, is because unless we know what we're doing in the classroom, we're not going to know if we're successful. So part of what I had in my class, I taught a class on chinuch. One of the things that every teacher needs is a vision. What do I want to accomplish? Because if I don't have any metrics, and I have no way to know what I'm doing, then I'm constantly going to be thrown off kilter by my students who are sitting in front of me. So I need to have a goal, objectives. And in secular studies, it's a little bit different because their objectives might be just content area. But as Kodesh teachers, we have a different mission. We're trying to raise our students. So I saw today, I was reminded of something that I saw in Pirkei Avos from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he said that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 Talmidim, and it describes each of their Talmidim. So why does it describe? And then it tells us that one of them was more than all of them. And so why does it tell us this? So an answer that he gives, and as I understand it, is that our job as teachers is that every single Jew in this world has something that makes them unique and more exceptional than everybody else in this universe, that every Jew has that koach, and our job as teachers is to find and explain that koach to this child who's sitting in front of us, so that they now know themselves better. That is not that all of our students are the same. We're trying to give them over information, but we're trying to develop the next generation. And something in my mission when I was teaching and when I am teaching is I'm not teaching the 9th grader that's sitting in front of me. I'm teaching that mother who's playing with her 5-year-old on Shabbos afternoon. What do they need to know in order to have a beautiful, wholesome, passionate Judaism that they are imparting to the next generation? And so this gets into my mission as a teacher, because we can look at it that I want to teach my class Shorashim and how to translate a pasuk, but we have the means and end. Our means is Torah and our end is also Torah, but we want to live a life of Torah. So I don't want to just teach them to read a pasuk. I want them to learn Torah. So to bring this down a little bit to a different level than most of us teach. So my daughter and I read Tehillim at night. She reads with my husband as well. And we say Tehillim. And so somebody said, "Oh, it's such good Kriya practice that your daughter is saying Tehillim." And I said, "No, she's doing Kriya so that she can say Tehillim. She's not saying Tehillim so she can practice her Kriya." That's my mission, is that we want them to learn Torah. We don't want them to just be in school. We want them to actually be passionate Jews and grow together. And we give them the tools to be able to act as they will as adults. So that's my mission when I'm teaching. And I hope that will help frame then our conversations when we're saying, how do we engage? What do we engage? How do we have classroom management? That our goal is really much bigger and much broader and long-term. Okay.
Wow. Thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, we're going to move on to the relationship between the teacher and the student. What is that relationship that we as teachers are trying to create with our students? Nechama, can you address that, please? And can you introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is Nechama Birnbaum. I live in Atlanta. I've been teaching in Tamima High School for the past 12 years. I'm from Atlanta and I was zoche to go to Tamima. I've taught various Limudei Kodesh subjects, mostly Chumash, but other Tanakh subjects as well. And I'm also a mechanachas in the school. So that's a little bit about me. So the relationship, this is perfect, right after what Shira just said about, what is our overall mission and vision. And it's this long-term, vision of not just the subject in front of me, not just the grading and the tests and the classroom. We're dealing with neshamos over here. And I love what you said from the Lubavitch Rebbe. It really reminds me of who I was going to say later on, who's my role model, which is one of them is the Alter of Slobodka, very similar kind of approach. So I would say that the relationship between the teacher and the student is the bridge to chinuch. That chinuch, which is kind of like what Shira said, which is cultivating and developing a long-term Eved Hashem, right? Like I think it's Rashi on Chanoch Lanar al Pitarko, right? Gam ki yazken lo yasor mimena, right? That it shouldn't be that the second we disappear, they throw it all away. It's to inculcate a human being and transform a human being, not just information, but transformation. So I think that the relationship between the teacher and the student is really the bridge and the container in which chinuch can happen. Right, the famous quote that I don't care what you know until I know that you care. And so because our goal is not just information, but transformation and real chinuch and passing over of the Mesorah, but not just the information of it, but the ruach of being an Eved Hashem and building the human being, the relationship is critical. And it's only in this context that anybody can, accept any form of chinuch. It reminds me of something that I teach in my Koheles class. The first word is divrei Koheles, right? And Rashi says over there that divrei is divrei tochacha. But Rabbi Heller says, I don't learn the Zohar, but she says that the Zohar says that divrei is a lashon of hamtaka. So she asks, how could it be tochacha and hamtaka, seemingly opposing things? So she answers that tochacha, which is words of rebuke, but we can say it's musar, it's developing the person, helping them personally develop. When that takes place in the context of a loving relationship, it leads to hamtaka, it leads to connection. And so, my aim as a teacher is to create a safe relationship where the student feels heard and the student feels, respected. I just saw from Rav Pam, he says that the first yesod of chinuch, I forgot the words, is to respect the student, to show them respect. And when they feel safe and heard and that their challenges, can have a space, that has to come from actually really respecting them, right? It's not just something to check off a list, but it's a question of how do I actually envision my students? And I often think about, I'm not a therapist, but I do have my master's degree in family therapy. And the self of the therapist is always, a huge deal because it's how does the therapist operate within that therapy session, right? So I like to think about the self of the teacher because our self is critical. How I actually view that student, am I actually a safe person? Because I could say all the right words, but the energy that's coming from me are my actual core beliefs that are inside of me. The students, especially teenagers, pick up on this. They sniff it out in a second. You could be saying one thing, but believe another, right? You can say, I believe in you. If you really don't, they know it. They feel it. They feel you from a mile away. So I always think about how do I view my students? Do I truly accept them? Do I value their world? And so I believe that initially, when you come into the classroom, when you start the year, the emphasis should be on building the relationship. And there's so many different ways of doing that. But I believe that the relationship is really the bridge and the context in which true chinuch can actually happen.
Right. I remember once hearing that it doesn't matter if your students like you, but if they don't like you, they're not going to learn from you. So you need them to like you. Not that the liking is important, but it makes that relationship that fosters the learning. Thank you. Okay, Shira, can you chime in on that question about that relationship?
Sure. So actually, I love everything Nechama said, and I'm gonna take a conversation that we had before about the role of a teacher in the relationship, because I came around to what Nechama and I had a conversation before about this, that there's a Pirkei Avos that says that the student's honor should be as precious to you as your own, and then the teacher's honor should be like the fear of Shemayim. So when I was talking to some of my students about relationships and relationship building, they were very concerned about the fact that they establish a presence. And I think there's a generational shift where there's not an assumption of a hierarchy in the classroom and in society. And so that's Nechama, what I think we talked about. And I realized that in my daughter's school, which is all about love. I mean, it's a fantastic school. They have a triangle on the board which says student, teacher, principal, Hashem. Like, really, you need to listen to your teachers. And this is a complete shift. So that piece is, I think, is a foundational piece that we need to, that depending on the age of the parent body that we're dealing with, the culture of the school, that's something that might be of interest to think about. But as Nechama said, I was looking back on a course of the class that I gave on relationships, and everything that you're saying is grounded in the Rambam. The Rambam says that a Talmud's kavod has to be precious to the teacher, and you have to karvan, you have to bring them close. And a teacher, a man, has to be careful with his students and to love them like children. So that's a halacha from the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah. It's not some like nice new agey kind of thing. The Machzor Vitri says very, very similarly that we have to treat our students like we would treat our friends. But he cautions us that it's not that they are our friends. We just need to treat them with the kavod we would treat our friends. And that's, I think, such an important role that we have, is that our relationship is that, and I'm just bringing the sources because you were so clear, Nechama, that the Ben Yehoyada says that we should be from the Talmidim of Aaron, Ohev Sabrios, that we should teach them, Ohev Sabrios, and then Umakarvim La Torah, we bring them close to Torah. He says it doesn't say, and then we will teach them Torah. It says we bring them close to Torah, because the only way that we can hope to have a relationship to have them come close to Torah is through love. And this is something that is in Pirkei Avos Lo Hakaptim Lamed, that Moshe Rabbeinu had to have a pleasant face. Hashem showed him a smile, so that he said you can only teach with a smile. I think it's something that we sometimes forget, that the best thing that we can do as teachers is not to prepare lessons, but to go to sleep early and make sure we're healthy, so that we are emotionally grounded and that we can give to our students from a healthy place. And I think that's the relationship. I think everything that Nechama said is like backed up in Chazal, but it might be something that we have to also make sure there's an authority piece, which is echoing what Nechama. I hope I didn't steal your thunder from that, but that is something that I really came to agree with you about that. So I think I think relationships are important, to sum up.
Beautiful. Okay. So what would you say that, your overall mission, how does that affect the classroom management? We have this great mission that we want to do, and how does that affect how we run our classrooms? And Liora, can you chime in on that?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and state that one more time? I want to make sure that I'm answering you the right way.
How does my overall mission affect my classroom management?
Yeah. It's an important question, because I think that, we always have to, we have to know what we're doing there in the first place, right? Why am I in this classroom? Why am I teaching this particular lesson, this unit, this subject? Why me? Why these students, right? All of that is big. And hopefully we know the why when we're standing there in the classroom. But the way in which that needs to impact my actual presence in the classroom and what I do in the classroom is I like to sum it up as follows, and this is connected to the previous question about what our mission is, and what our approach needs to be to chinuch overall. I try to sum up my own mission as follows. What we're looking to do is to give our students or enable, through our chinuch, our students to be able to successfully utilize the skills that we are teaching them and the ideas and the concepts and all of the machshava and the hasagos that we're teaching them, but they should be able to then take that through life in order to continue learning independently, right? To be lifelong learners. But what has to go hand in hand with that is that we also need to instill within them, inspire within them the desire to actually make use of those skills, right? And to actually live according to those Torah values. Because if you don't have one, then the other one is useless, right? Either way you're looking at it. Should I continue, or do you think that that's is
You have
that
more to
is that
say,
what you
go
want to
ahead,
hear?
I love it.
Yeah, so I really think that we have to just walk in there saying to ourselves, okay, how am I going to accomplish these two things today? And in service of the first goal, which has to do with making sure that they have the knowledge and the skills in order to be able to learn independently, we have to really know what we're trying to target, and in some schools and in some school systems, that might be very clearly defined and delineated and kind of handed down from the top, from administration to faculty. This is what your mission is. This is what materials you'll use. These are the skills they need to learn. Shalom al Yisrael, that's amazing. In my experiences, mainly teaching in small out-of-town schools, that is not something that many of us are blessed with, which ultimately does lead teachers to have to dig really deep and kind of use their own creativity and use their own knowledge and use their own, understanding of what the importance of this chinuch is and what they should be, teaching, which obviously is a little bit variable depending on the school and, the student body and the community, et cetera. So that's something we have to have clarity about. And once we start with that picture in mind, so then the next question is, how am I going to introduce this to the students in a way that they're going to want to engage with this and they're going to be sparked and interested and curious about this in a way that it's going to stick with them. And I think also in keeping with everything that the previous speakers have just been talking about, means that we need to really at all times try to present, to present Torah from a place of love and demonstrate, not just tell, but demonstrate over and over in many different ways to our students why this Torah matters to them as individuals and why this is worth it, why this is worth spending their parents' money and their time and their effort and their energy and sitting with hard things, right? And really dealing with all of the frustration that comes from schoolwork. But as long as they understand why this is of eternal primary importance and why it matters to me personally, then they tend to be willing to put in that work.
Thank you, Liora. I love the way you use the word curious. I think that's so important, making them curious. I'm going to ask Nechama to chime in on this. I'm familiar with Tamima, and I know there's like a atmosphere of love there. So I'm curious to know how you make that happen with the classroom management.
Okay, anything that's at Tamima has nothing to do with me. It's our previous principal, but I agree with you. Okay, so just I loved everything that you said, Liora. And I just want to take like a different angle, which is like the management, which I think assumes that there might be some sort of behavioral issue that's going on, whether it's with the whole class, whether it's right. So any like behavioral thing, how does the person deal with that, and how does that fit in with the mission? So because like I said before, I believe that the only bridge to chinuch really is the relationship that has to guide how I deal with classroom management and how I deal with discipline. So the students should not feel like I am using my authority as a coercion tool, right? That my only goal is to like be able to talk, that my only goal is to get them, excuse my language, to just like shut up and listen so that I can have it easier as a teacher. It's like I have found myself, just like saying to my kid, like, I need you to whatever, I need to put the baby to sleep, right? And who's that all about? It's all about me and my ease and comfort and convenience in life. So my mission, if my mission is to create that relationship so that chinuch can happen and impart all these beautiful lessons and long-term values, and like Liora was saying, that they should realize the eternity of it. So therefore, my discipline has to be in that context. And I believe that if the foundation of the relationship is there, then I think that there's a huge difference. Every disciplinary action is going to cause discomfort. That's just the way that it is. We're human and we don't like to be criticized and we don't like to be told what we're doing wrong, right? But there's a huge difference in the discomfort that's caused in a student when they feel shamed or demeaned or embarrassed or like you're out to get them, versus the discomfort that's caused in that student if they know that it's coming from a place of love. And also you've created a context for those rules. So on the first day of school, I will, have a little powwow and I will talk about my class and the goals and everything. And then I'll say, like, in order to have a classroom run, there has to be a context for that, right? The only way that we can actually learn is if we're respectful. And here are the rules. And I will list the rules very clearly. There's no talking. You raise your hand, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll say to them, like, how does that feel to you, right? Is that something that's a challenge for you? Right away at the beginning, I'm stating my authority and my discipline plan. In other words, my rules and my expectations very clearly. But by saying to them something like, how does that sit with you? Is that something that you struggled with? Have you struggled with in the past? I'm giving them a Pesach. It's not that my rules are optional if they don't work for them. Not at all, right? But I am giving them the Pesach that, like, I care about your world. And I'm not just here to, like, I think Debra, said, like, the rod of Chumash or whatever she said, to whip you into shape so that I can actually do my job. I care about you. And I very much tell my students all the time that the rules are here to help create a learning environment, number one. And I will say to a girl, I just said to a girl today, she had a dress code infraction. She was not wearing a shell, and we have to wear shells in our school under our uniform shirts. And I first said to her, like, I just want to make sure that I'm right that you didn't wear a shell. I have a relationship with her. And I said to her, like, is there something that you struggle with this rule? And there was. She told me what it was. And I said at the end, I'm going to have to give you that infraction. And I said, and that it's good for you to become a disciplined person, to do these things, even though they're hard for you. And she heard me, but I had a conversation with her. I gave her the demerit, right? I stood by my rule. And, as we all know, kids need the safety and security net that they know that no matter how much I push against the barriers and no matter how much I yell and I scream because I say that I hate it, you are going to be that adult that holds that box for me so that I know that I'm contained even when I feel dysregulated. So just very quickly, I'm not sure how long I wasn't timing myself,
You're
but
good.
I created these journal pages because, again, I'm very into, like, myself and what's happening for me. In my own self that's influencing my discipline. I know that for many years, my fear of not being liked would come up when I was faced with a situation where I would have to discipline or exert my authority on a student. And that made it very confusing for me. So I try very hard to work through my own stuff. If it's in general, like, how does chinuch, I don't know, Alyssa, if you want to put up those pages right now, or we can send them at the end. But I like to think about, like, how do I feel about boundaries and consequences? Like, do I really believe that this is the right thing for kids? Is it personal? Like, is there something about this kid that irks me? And yes, that happens all the time. I just had that today with a student. Again, I'm just going to share this, even though it's very embarrassing. There is a certain student that I have that drives me crazy. And there's something in her that, as the Kliyakar said in last week's Parsha, Kol HaPosel B'mumo Posel, right? The Gemara says it, what I see in her is because I have it inside of myself. And that's why it drives me crazy. So I know that. And I have yet to really work through it, but I will, in Hashem. But I gave her a test back and I saw that she was not happy. And I really truly feel for her. She tries really hard, but, like, it's really hard for her to do well. And because there's something about her that drives me crazy, I could not get myself to say, like, so and so, I see that you're having a hard time with your grade. Like, do you want to talk about it? And when I just said, like, here's your test, have a great day. And when I came home, like I was like devastated. Like my annoyance at her, whatever it is that she triggers in me, got in the way of me being a supportive teacher. So that was not an example of discipline, but like I think that our own stuff really gets in the way, and to try to work through what is it, about me, like that student with a dress code. So because like recently I've tried really hard to clarify like my position about dress code. Why do I believe that it's the right thing? Not that it's my decision, but because I work in a school where there's a dress code, and I try to clarify like why is it good for them, right? Why is it good for them for me to enforce this rule? And so therefore I had a lot of clarity when I went into this interaction with this girl. I knew very clearly it's really good for her for me to not let her get away with it. It's important that she feels that structure and that safety and seen, and because I have that relationship with her, I felt confident going into that interaction, and Baruch Hashem, like it ended well. But again, I just another thing about this idea about our mission and classroom management. I would also say that because it's all about our mission and our vision and not our own personal stuff. So the way that we do it should really be like just very like impersonal. It should be like a traffic cop. It shouldn't never have any like emotion attached to it. Like girls, and it's happened to me plenty of times that I like, it's just so frustrating. Like they won't stop and they whatever. You talk, please go to the principal's office. Totally impersonal. There's no emotion. It's very hard. We have to stay regulated in order to be able to do that. But like this is the expectation. So I think that, the overall mission of creating a relationship in order to be able to really do chinuch, the classroom management is in the context of that relationship. And listen, it doesn't always have such a good ending. The students sometimes walk away not feeling so great. But if they know in general that I care and I love them, over time, it should have, it can have a good effect. I just want to say a story about, not a story, but just something that happened to me this year, where sometimes you have to make the call not to to ignore our behavior, and we're not Nevi'im, so we try our best. But I had a girl that like I didn't teach her last year, but we had interactions, and then this year I teach her, and she just gives off, like as the teenagers would say, like kind of like a chutzpahdik vibe, but she doesn't mean to be chutzpahdik. She's just immature. Like she'll just say things to a teacher that like other girls like just would never say, And I really like was on the verge of saying something to her so many times, and I'm like, you know what? I don't teach her yet, or I just started teaching her. I don't really have a relationship. Like I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait. Even though like it didn't disrupt my class. Had it disrupted my class, I would have said something. In fact, she did something else that did disrupt my class, and I did, hold her to it. But I didn't say anything. 2 weeks ago, she asked to make a meeting with me, and she comes, and what does she tell me? Mrs. Birnbaum, I feel like I'm known as a class clown. And it's true that I have a fun personality, but I also have a really serious side to myself. And I really want to develop myself. I just feel so stuck in the image that people see of me. Like, how can I transform myself? Um, and I talked with her a lot about like why is her image so important to her? It's not really about that. But the bottom line is, had I like said something to her about like that chutzpahdik vibe that she gives off, she never ever would have come to me. And now like we've had so many meetings. I went on walks with her. Like she really is so invested in becoming a more mature, thoughtful person, and allowing me to help her on that journey. And had I said something, so it's always a balance. And I always tell myself, like, because I'm not a Navi, I'll never get it perfect and I'll never get it right. Like to presume that I know what's best for a kid in every situation would be ridiculous, like and arrogant. I don't know. But I do know that the more that I work on my internal world and have that clarity as I walk into the classroom and it's about the students and what's best for them long term, I'll be the most successful that I can be.
Wow. Wow. That was a lot. Phew. Okay. I would love to be in all your classrooms. You're like amazing. Okay, so we're going to go on to some more practical things, and I'm going to ask you about some techniques and strategies that you've used to increase student engagement and focus. How do we make that happen? And Debra, can you chime in on that?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a scary part for me, and I'm being very daring because I'll be honest with you, I am an old-fashioned teacher. As I said, I've been teaching for almost 30 years. And when I left the formal classroom like of high school in 2010, to run a seminary until 2019. So that means I left when smartboards were just coming out. And my classroom didn't have one because I shared my classroom with an old-fashioned math teacher who didn't want one because he wanted to pull the graph thing down from the middle of the room. So I never even learned how to use a smartboard. And when I was teaching in seminary, that just wasn't how we taught. You know, it was more upfront instructional style learning, and of course, engaging the girls in different ways at that age level. And then when I went back to upfront instructional style teaching in SKA, it was, I even like went in to do my model lesson, and there was that smartboard. I had no clue how to use it, but they had faith in me, and I said they could teach an old Bubby new tricks. So I was even featured at a professional development day of about a year and a half ago, for me to promote some of the things that I, tell other teachers about some things I do in the classroom. I was so tickled pink about that. Today we had a professional development day. It was 3 hours about student engagement, where I was just taking like tons of notes to share with you tonight. And we even had, at the end of that, we had a professional teacher coach come to do that. And then, but our own teachers shared a lot of what they do in the classroom. And older teachers, younger teachers. So I've definitely learned a lot from teaching in SKA, teaching with younger teachers. And I just have to say that I've made myself vulnerable to say that I don't know. And I'm eager to learn, and I'm eager to try new things. So Liora, I have to say that I had a better lesson coach for 3 years. I had a Matt from Boston, not Liora from Denver. I don't know, but he did teach me a lot, and I think it's an amazing program. If anybody can tap into getting a better lesson coach through your school, it's an amazing thing to do. So basically, I look at, while I do have that formal Chumash, Pasuk, Rashi, Mefarshim, Alimud, things that I want to give over, but the whole idea is how to get the students more engaged. So as I'm doing a lesson, I start to think, we've had a few days of just like absorbing some material. How can I have the students reflect now? Or how can I introduce the topic by having the students really get their hands onto it before we sink into the psukim and the limud and so on and so forth. So I've learned about things that you probably all know about, entrance tickets, exit tickets. Those were new terms for me, but I've learned how to utilize them. Because my students are on iPads, I love Google Forms. I've never lost a paper since I've started putting things on Google Forms. It's amazing. So I definitely start sometimes with chavrusa preparation learning to get them with questions. I do mild, medium, and spicy. So that means mild is you're doing the basic. Medium is, mild is you can do it with Mrs. Green. Medium is you're just doing the basic questions. And spicy is engaging in some more mefarshim learning. And that's to start off like a new inya and a whole, little group of psukim that we have. We could have exit tickets, let's have a few trigger questions of something that we learned at the end. In my 9th grade Chumash class, I created a little icon. It's called the Thinking Girl. Every year we try to come up with a name for her, but basically after some amounts of material where I think there could be an interesting question to engage students in, I have a thinking question. So when they see the Thinking Girl in their guided notes, they know that that's time for them to have a thinking question, and everybody has time to reflect on the thinking question. So those are things that, like, I just, again, try to take the pulse of the classroom. There are so many different strategies and so many different places to get resources like this. In my 10th grade, where we learn Bamidbar, when we get up to Yoshua and Kalev and the conflict they have about peer pressure with the Meraglim, that they don't listen to the other Meraglim, we have a debate: healthy peer pressure versus positive peer pressure versus negative peer pressure. And they're all different modalities that each team has to use to present their side of the story, or their side of the debate. So the idea is high attention will come when there's high commitment. And when the students really sink into it, then there's high commitment. Starting a unit off with something called Think, Pair, Share, where they come up with 3 ideas of a trigger question, but there are 12 boxes on the paper. Then they have to go give an idea and share an idea and get an idea. I'm sorry, that's not think, prepare, share. That's give, get. It's something else. Think, prepare, share is when you come to the chavrusas and you think together and then you share. But I forgot what it is. Give one, get one. And then you walk around the classroom giving ideas, getting ideas, and then everybody has to share it at the end, something they got and something that they gave. I just had a unit with a Pirkei Avos class about chesed. And they asked that it should not, we only have assessments in this class. We don't have formal tests. And it's an elective. And they asked me not to have like, I don't know, the same kind of assessment I did last time. They said, Mrs. Green, can you be a little more creative this time? I said, okay, sure. I had them each come up. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos was about chesed, and we learned through a lot of sources, Sifsei Chaim and Mechtavei Eliyahu and Rambam on chesed. And I had them come up with a chesed organization that they created, and they had to solicit donations for this chesed organization through proving to the person that they want to give to this chesed with all of the ideas, different, I gave them parameters about what they had to use in this chesed letter. And I got so many different responses. It was really amazing to see. My Beresha class is just my 12th grade. So they're already a little bit more sophisticated. I try to find so many different kinds of articles that tie into the foundations of Amunah and Bitachon. We're dealing with Parak Aleph still, and there's so much there. Talk to them about what is astrology real? Is so much. I mean, for that, I just have to say, Ari Kaplan is the way to go. Go back to your old Ari Kaplan books. So many articles, and those girls are like searching for those types of foundation things to sink themselves into. They really, really do. They really appreciate it. So these are just, again, I think about it. I need to shake up the situation a little bit. Then I go to find the resources, or think about something that I learned from Better Lesson Design, or speak to other teachers in the teacher's room. And again, be vulnerable, say, teach me. I don't know. I'm not sure how to do that. And then go for it and try it. And sometimes it works and I want to do it again. And then I have it set for the next year and the next year. And then sometimes I'm like, no, I didn't really like that one so much. We're gonna push that aside. We're gonna try something else.
Wow.
Song is also an amazing way to go. Find a song that pertains to something that you're learning, and don't just have them listen to it. Have them listen to it with the lyrics in front of them. Highlighting different ideas, like, and again, reflecting on that. One of the things my students have to do on their tests, it's like a, I guess emotional, social well-being type of questions, is reflect on the learning that they had. What is something that you took away from what we learned? What is something, that inspired you? I have a student who doesn't daven. She's a very, very, very hard life. And we were learning about Tfilat Chana, and when I asked that question, she said, Mrs. Green, is it okay to write, I don't daven and I don't know? And I said, yes, it is an okay thing, because that is at the moment how she is reflecting on what she is learning. And I'm trying to reach them where they are and then help them take the learning and own it and take it onward to the future.
Wow, good for you. That's amazing that you were able to do that later on in your teaching. I'm blown away. Liora, can you chime in on some techniques and strategies?
Sure, absolutely. And I realize that we're getting a little bit short on time. We still have some more things that we wanted to try to discuss. Debra, those were amazing, amazing suggestions. And I utilized many of those things myself in my
Thank
teaching.
you, Better Lesson.
And by the way, I came to coaching through Better Lesson after having been a participant myself quite a few years ago as well. So that was, also my derech. But it's hard almost to choose just, one or two things. Debra just suggested so many incredible strategies that are highly engaging. A few other things that I might mention. We also, when we were kind of preparing for this conversation, really were thinking hard, do we want to talk more about strategies that involve the use of digital technology, or do we want to avoid that? And we realize that in the core community, there's a wide range of representation, from schools that completely shun, all forms of digital technology in and out of school, to those that wholeheartedly embrace it, and everything in between. So what I might just throw in are a couple of strategies that can be done kind of on a sliding scale, as high or low digital tech as you want it to be, or as your students are supposed to have access to. And I would just preface this by saying that, the word technology sometimes like raises the hair on the back of our necks. Technology means tools, right? So it's always a question of what tools are available to me, what tools do my students have access to, and are these the right tools for the right job, right? For whatever it is that I'm trying to create here. Now, that said, something that I have used with a lot of success, particularly at the middle school level, is something called choice boards, which is, if you Google this strategy, you'll see a lot of examples of how it can be used in a general studies classroom, but I've found many wonderful ways to adapt it to a Kodesh classroom. And essentially, it's pretty similar to like a tic-tac-toe board, or kind of a menu, like a grid. And the way that I like to structure it is I'll present it to students usually at the beginning of a new learning unit, let's say a new perek. And I'll give them a set portion of psukim that I want them to go through, that we're going to be focusing on. And in each square on the grid, there is a different learning task. That's what I like to call them. Something that's, kind of not bite-sized, but something that isn't meant to take more than, maybe 5 minutes apiece. And the way that I like to structure it is that there's a column for, let's say, Lashon, so it's whatever new milim we're introducing, or Shorashim, or things like that. There's a column for let's say, Pshat, where it's just how much do they, or to show me how much their understanding of the pshat of the psukim. A column for metharshim, so it's kind of addressing different types of skills that that we want our students to be using, that we're trying to strengthen in them at whatever level they're at. And students are told that they need to do, let's say, X number of squares, X number of tasks on that choice board. Some of them can maybe be done with a chavrusa, and I'll specify. Otherwise, it's each person on their own, and they can just kind of go off around the classroom and get to work. And obviously it can be structured and arranged in a lot of different ways, but that's something that puts the onus of learning, the responsibility is on the student, and they know exactly what they have to do. So that's something that can get students very engaged, and it has the added bonus of freeing the teacher up to be able to circulate around the room and to be able to watch what the kids are doing, not hovering over them, but and interact a little bit more. Oh, I love that you picked that one. What made you choose that one first, right? Or, oh, I see that you chose 3 things from one column. I'm going to ask you to challenge yourself to pick one from another column, right? And to troubleshoot, right? And be available when students have questions. All of that is something that is possible with an activity like this. Another strategy that I love to use at the high school level even is something that most of us would only associate with like kindergarten, maybe not higher than 1st grade, and that is using stations, learning stations, around the classroom, where they are given again, kind of like a menu or a very clear document and graphic organizer outlining exactly what their learning tasks are. And I've done this, for instance, in teaching Sefer Yeshayahu, so they might have tasks that involve, really like, some pretty intensive steiging, on a particular, malbim or something. But it can be any range of skills or learning activities. Now, when it comes to the use of digital technology, so if I found a short clip of a shir or a video or audio shear that I want them to listen to and then maybe answer some questions about or reflect on, then I might include a link and I give them the Google Docs so that they can all access the materials digitally. It might include some other kind of, a short video or a map, of like somewhere that's relevant, somewhere where the events described in the Tanakh maybe are taking place. The sky's the limit, right? So I don't want to use up too much time because I see we're counting down to the end here, but anything that's going to shift the, kind of shift the focus from, look at me, I'm the teacher, I'm telling you all the things, and you're just kind of passively sitting there and, hopefully you're listening and not moving for 45 minutes, which is honestly kind of crazy, then anything that gets the students to be more in the active role. Physical movement is really important. I'm telling you, I've taught in co-ed schools out here in Denver. I've taught high school boys who are a foot and more taller than me. And they need to move and they need to be doing things that are physical and grouping them in different ways and chavrusa learning in different ways. Making sure that you are changing the tasks up periodically and not expecting people, meaning your students, to be sitting with any one activity for an unreasonable stretch of time, which of course is highly dependent on many different factors, right? So there's no one right or wrong way to do that, but it's something that's really important when we're talking about engagement and also focus, because we have to be realistic about what students are capable of, what's developmentally appropriate, what is kind of generationally the norm, and also kind of in keeping with some of the things that Nechama, for instance, was saying earlier. Showing respect for our students means I'm not going to bog them down with something that would make me miserable if I had to do it as well. Right. And I think just, one example to leave you with here is, how many of us have sat in a faculty meeting or a professional development where it was important or we were interested, but we had to sit for like 3 hours straight and we were going out of our minds, right? Let's get them up and moving. Let's let them be physical in service of their Torah learning.
Beautiful. Wow, that's great. Thank you, Liora. We just have one more question, and that is, do you have a foundational approach or a role model who inspires your teaching? Nechama, can you help us out with that?
Sure. Okay, so role models like abound from all of my years of being a student and, everything like that. And I think I just got a bunch of new ones. But a foundational approach, I would say, I, I already mentioned the altar of Slobodka and like God loves Adam. I know that's not practically, that doesn't inform anything practically, without discussing it, but just his vision and like not creating robots and creating a human being. And you have to be a human being first. There's a sefer that someone just introduced me to recently called Shema B'ni, written by Rabbi Luban from Miami, where he had a kesher with many of the Talmidim of the altar of Kelm, the altar of Slobodka, and others, and he interviewed them and their approach to chinuch and to musar and everything like I've read. There's just, so profound and, very much with the Altar's approach. But I would say a book that really, I try to reread all the time is Spare the Child by Rabbi Yaakovzin, because he really has like such a good balanced approach of like the relationship piece as a backdrop for the discipline and how that could work. And he goes through so many different details of like incentives and prizes. And it's really a parenting book, but I think it really applies also to teaching. And then just one more thing I just want to say, like, just to end off, Debra mentioned like the idea of reflection questions. So I love doing that also. Something that I think adds to the relationship part, the part that shows that I care about you in that context of the material, are asking questions like, what does this bring up for you? Do you experience any resistance to this idea? And is there something about this that is hard for you, that challenges you? And then questions like, what would it take? What kind of resources do you need? What kind of steps do you think you need to take forward to move forward in this area? So I'm taking like the content that I presented, and then I'm saying, okay, there's a human being in this room, and you have a whole world, and you may not like the ideas that I presented. They might bother you. You might disagree with me, or you've been struggling with this internally. Like, I like to daven, but like that example that you brought, or I don't know that I believe that Hashem really loves me. Look at this and this and this and this. So I try very hard, especially in 11th and 12th grade, to have these kinds of discussions where like everything's open for discussion. Like, you can challenge everything that I said in a respectful way, of course, but I don't care just about you memorizing the information and spitting back, it back at me on a test and great, Shalom Yisrael, we did our job here. I care about you as a human being and how that Torah fits into your world. And what do you think? Having them think like, okay, there's this Torah that I learned. I'm not there yet. I'm a teenager in 2024. What's it going to take to get me to that place? And like we talk a lot about, what does transformation mean? How do I transform based on the information and the Torah that I do believe in? So that also just shows them like, I really care about you and your experience with what I'm teaching, not just I want to give it over, get a good grade, move on.
Okay, thank you, Nechama. We just want to open this up to the audience and see if you had any questions, any comments. We would love to hear from you. You can put it on the chat, or you can just start talking.
Well, I wanted to add something that they showed at our professional development day that I thought was really funny, because if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. So they showed a room of students taking a test. Typical, people are spaced, a little far apart from each other. Everybody's writing, they're doing their thing, and then the voice goes, "Does this take place anywhere else in the real world?" And if you think about it, that only takes place in school. And it's kind of odd to think about, where else in the world do you have to sit for 45 minutes and just take notes on something? It doesn't happen. So if we're trying to make them productive people, engaged, lifelong learners, and moving on to the next stage of life, which is, I could not fathom as a student when I left school what life would look like nowadays. I don't know what it's going to look like in 30 years from now, but we have to prepare students that are going to be ready to be engaged and use what we gave them as tools to function in the rest of their life. And it just made me laugh, because it did look ridiculous. Like, there is nowhere else that takes place. I don't know. So
Can I jump in and add something to that?
think about. Sure.
So that certainly resonates a lot. I think we all recognize that that's just the world, right? That's the world that we live in. And I also think that given the shifts that have taken place in the last few decades at an accelerating pace in terms of not seeing age or years and years of experience and acquired wisdom as being necessarily an indicator that someone is an authority figure, right? Like in the society around us, the zeitgeist is more one of, well, I educated myself, or I have thoughts and opinions. So, why is that any different from what some, old person says, even if they have, actual, acquired years of expertise and wisdom, right? I heard somewhere a few years ago an idea that really stuck with me, which is that the generation that we're teaching now, the world around them is teaching them to see themselves as creators. Now, and that therefore education has to grapple with that, right? And has to kind of come to terms with, or think carefully about how to shift, kind of in sync with students who don't see themselves as the ones who are learning. They are the ones who are creating and doing, right? And I think that for us as mechanchos, who have Masora, right, and who have a tremendous sense of yira and kavod for tradition in the very technical sense, right, in the sense of like what has been passed down to us from generations all the way going back to, you know, the Avos and the Imahos, and certainly what came to us at Har Sinai. We have to think carefully about how to make sure that we are still impressing upon our students and helping them to really understand why we have this Masorah and why Masorah is so important and what the value of it is. And at the same time, try to get into their minds a little bit, right? And to try to kind of see it from their viewpoint. And that might mean that we listen a little more, you know, when they want to share an opinion. And that doesn't mean that we're putting their opinions on a pedestal. It doesn't mean that we're, you know, telling them that, yeah, of course, everything's right, because that's ridiculous and it's sheker. You know, it doesn't mean that we're saying, oh, you know, there's Rashi and there's you, right? And who's to say which one is better? You know, chas v'shalom. That's not, you know, that's not what we should be advocating, you know, or should be doing here. But even just like kind of acknowledging that their desire to, let's say, you know, give an answer, you know, that is, you know, something they came up with, that might be different, you know, from the answer that we, or the explanation that we, you know, want to give over to them, want to share with them. Even just acknowledging, like, that's a good thing, that they are thinking deeply about the material, that they are asking questions, and that they are trying to think of answers. And we have to, maybe in a somewhat more gentle way, kind of, you know, steer them in the right direction, right? And in the direction of, let's you know, I like a piece of what you said. Let me focus on that. You know, here's the approach that we're going to take. You know, here's what Rashi said. This is how it's explained in the Gemara, etc. Right? But we want to encourage them to think in a personal way about Torah, because again, this generation, not just you know, like this idea that I heard someone say, you know, that they think of themselves as creators, but they everything has to be personally relevant and personally meaningful to them, or they have no interest in it whatsoever, right? And there's no reason why they should put any effort or commitment into it, right? Because the world is open to them. The world of possibilities is open to them. So there's no such thing anymore of, this is just how it is. We have to get more comfortable with being able to say, let's talk about why. And that doesn't mean that we always have answers. One thing I, you know, kind of say, like, ad nauseum probably to my students, it comes up all the time, is there are things that we just are not going to know. And we have to get comfortable with uncertainty and with loose ends, right? And with things that sometimes seem like contradictions. That doesn't mean we don't keep learning, we don't keep asking questions, but we're not always going to get a satisfactory answer. If we understood everything, we would be, by definition, Hashem.
Liora,
That's how it goes.
Liora, I just want to say that I love what you just said, because I think especially in what's happening in the world right now, we have to be able to, they have to know that. We just don't know, and Hashem is Hashem, and we're just not going to understand it all.
Yeah, I want to add that it's very interesting about the fact that the world around us is turning to creators, because that's really our goal, is to be the Mitzvah Elyo, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the ultimate creator. And Vayomer Elokim, his creation was through speech. And so what our classrooms are doing is we're asking our students to please, we can either stop them from being like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or we can encourage them to be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And my son just had a feher, so he's, of course, they're very nervous. So the last question that the principal and the mashgiach asked them is, they gave him a piece of the Gemara, and he asked him a question. He said, my Rebbe didn't teach me that. They said, we don't care what your Rebbe said. What do you think? And he had to come up and go through and the logic. And then they said, oh yeah, that the Maharsha says that. But that's our classic way of learning. That's not I think because we've maybe in our female, in our female environments, we're used to having the Rashi says this, the Ramban says this, but that's not necessarily we have to have it grounded. We have to teach them how to do critical thinking grounded in legitimate sources. But then there is the flexibility to allow a chiddush, which I think is how do you do that, and in what way, and how do you make it relevant? And that goes up the Bloom's taxonomy, which is always going to be more interesting. And when students are engaged, then behaviors become less, that we don't need to worry about the behaviors. And so really what I think we're saying is that as we can engage and really become more authentic in our Jewish learning, then we will have authentic relationships, and in our classroom won't be as authoritarian in giving
Shira,
away material.
Shira, thank you. That was an amazing ending. Thank you all so much. You were amazing. This was such a treat for me and for everybody else. I know we wanted to talk about some success stories. So if anybody utilizes anything that we talked about in this conversation, you want to put it on the chat, the Teachers Lounge, we would love to hear about that. And thank you so much. And we look forward to doing something like this again. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Night.
Good night. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
Thank you.